So basically saying like doing everything by hand, doing things with if-then statements and collections of rules, and going to a scenario where the outputs and recommendations that are being supplied by artificial intelligence tell you something you couldn't have possibly known. And that first moment you get something that you couldn't have gotten to, or it amazes you. And that was right. That's AI for me. So I got a recommendation to make a decision that I couldn't have possibly gotten on my own. And to me, that's an exciting way to describe it. But it's confidence in predictions or predictive confidence. Those are my ways of getting people pumped about implementing AI internally.
Welcome to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast, where Justin Grammens and the team at Emerging Technologies North talk with experts in the fields of artificial intelligence and deep learning. In each episode, we cut through the hype and dive into how these technologies are being applied to real-world problems today. We hope that you find this episode educational and applicable to your industry, and connect with us to learn more about our organization at AppliedAI.mn. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. Today, we're talking with Jeff Coyle. Jeff is a cross-disciplined, data-driven inbound marketing executive with 20-plus years of experience managing products and website networks focused on helping companies grow. He's the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Muse. Muse is an industry-leading technology and methodology for content planning and evaluation. It combines artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and machine learning algorithms to produce actionable insights for inbound marketers. AI, NLP, and ML, those are all music to our ears here, Jeff, on the Applied AI podcast. Jeff holds a BS in computer science from the Georgia Institute of Technology with a specialization in usability. And most importantly, Jeff is a co-founder at Bluff Brewing and a 2020 U.S. Open Beer Championship winner for Bluff Mexican Lager. So I love a good lager. I'm sure it tastes great. Thanks, Jeff, for being on the program.
Thanks for that awesome intro. I've got a lot going on, as you can see. I like the hat tip to Georgia Tech. That was the whole infrastructure for all of this happened. It's a wonderful place, and it gets better and better, too.
I gave sort of a high-level interview here, or overview, I guess. But, maybe give a little bit of a short background, maybe how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. So the short, long story would be I went to Georgia Tech for computer science. I always knew I wanted to be in computer science. I was heavily focused on usability theory, as well as a kind of search engine design, the earliest versions, text analysis, et cetera. I started working at a startup when I was a junior in college called Knowledge Storm. And Knowledge Storm was a website network that was focused on generating leads for software companies. And this was before leads were a thing. We were convincing large technology companies to have content on their site. You should have content on your site. You should have content that generates leads. And we turned that into a huge network of sites that were generating millions of leads per month. And I was both a product manager. Also, I managed all the search components of this 200 website network. So the way that would work would be basically like you'd be on a site, whether it was our site or a partner site, you would register to download a white paper, right? And then we would sell that information to the vendor. So we turned that into a machine. We were acquired in 2007 by a company called TechTarget, who's a major B2B technology publisher, where I led the traffic search and engagement team, which was basically like their in-house for all things traffic. And the cool thing about that, and why I included it in this story, is because it got me my first exposure to editorial and writers, because we didn't have writers at Knowledge Storm, but TechTarget had this wonderful infrastructure of really accomplished writers, accomplished editorial and experts. And what I realized was quickly, not a lot of what was being done was data driven. There was a lot of subjectivity and expertise driven. The subjectivity and the expertise was extremely valuable, but it could be even more valuable if paired with data. And so one mission for my time there was, how do I get this information that some people classify as demand generation, lead gen, conversion data, or SEO information, where we should be publishing in order to own this and that? And how do I actually support them and amplify the expertise? And the first swings at that, are terrible, because they're doing manual work, manual brainstorming to decide what to write and what to update. I'm delivering keyword lists. They're like, what do you know about this? I've been doing this for 20 years, right? And everything in between. And so what I figured out was that there's a dramatic need for intelligence about content. And that was where, I was actually doing a taxonomy and ontology project when I was there, and I was researching possible software solutions. And I found the original one-page website barely had a user interface for Muse. And my co-founder, Aki, I asked him, I'm like, do you do this? And he's like, well, not really, but here's what we do. And what he described was a topic modeling infrastructure that told the story of expertise with artificial intelligence. So we are able to understand a topic or a concept and tell you, if you were an expert and you understood this concept and you really lived it, knew it, love it, here's how you would cover it with content. Here's the type of site you might build. Here's all the other concepts that would make up the entire buyer journey or the learning journey. And I looked at what he sent me and I said, oh my gosh, I've been doing this manually. He took a 30-hour process down to 4 minutes. And this was in 2014. And I was like, oh gosh. And so I ended up being early evangelist customer. Everything worked really well. And then when I left to go pursue a consulting opportunity as well as work at a private equity firm, Aki came back to me and said, hey, Jeff, you really understand this and you understand kind of where this could go. Will you join me as a late co-founder? And I said, what's that mean? What's late co? And he said, it means you're not going to get paid. And I'm like, sweet, let's do it. And the rest is history. That was now 7-ish plus years ago. That's kind of how a bill became a law. I've done everything there is to do related to getting traffic through websites. And now being able to use my knowledge of natural language processing, text analytics, and have an amazing engineering team focused on AI in order to empower editorial excellence was always my mission. It just took 15 years of my 23 and a half year career to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it seems like marketing and AI are sort of becoming more and more popular. They're really sort of hot trends sort of coming together. When you look back to 2014 and between then and now, how are you seeing this sort of space change? Like how has your company changed and sort of evolved over the past 7 years?
We've always been probably 2 years ahead of the market with our most growth-focused solutions. And I like to describe the progression of text editing. The first time you ever used a spell checker, you were like, this will never work. And then now, God, imagine not using a spell checker. And then you got grammar checker. The first time you use a grammar checker, you were like, oh, this is terrible. And now it's like, I can't imagine not working with a grammar solution or a usage solution now, a Hemingway or a Grammarly. We introduced the concept of providing knowledge and expertise assistance to writers in 2015. And everybody was just like, no, I'm not ready for this. And so we had to almost like spin it to be like, hey, this is for SEO. This is going to improve your rankings. But then we realized this is a content intelligence. It's so much more than that. Yeah, the output is better rankings and more traffic for your site. But the reason why is because you're writing higher quality content that's more appealing to users and better represents your business. So what I would say is the market has changed because people are getting more mature and they understand that they need to represent their business well. They don't need to trick Google with pages that aren't good. Because when people get to those pages, they're like, this is terrible. Who wrote this? Oh my gosh, this is a big brand, like cringe. And that has been beautiful for me personally, because I've been standing on top of that mountain since 2006, high quality content. And it finally like 2014 was like, oh, you have to do this in order to succeed. But how do you do it? How do you do it efficiently? And now it's like every season, it seems to have a new threat to quality and then a realization that, figuring out ways to, make your writers superstars and your subject matter experts shine fights that threat, right? And then when I said, you might have a threat of natural language generation, of creating a bunch of bad content. But what happens is then it corrects. It's like, ooh, well, we can use this to empower our best writers to be faster and to be happier. Every cycle, it's like new tech. And wait a second, this creates low quality content. Let's drag it back and then optimize the middle. And that's what we've seen just over and over again. And the cool thing is finally editorial teams are getting it. They need support. and SEO teams are getting it. They need improved workflows, and they also need to be empathetic with their writers. And then the data scientists are now realizing, whoa, I can make lots of money if I do things for MarTech.
Yeah, sure. MarTech is a term, huh? I guess I hadn't really been following that, but that sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah, coined by I'm gonna maybe I'll miss his name. Breaker. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he coined it, but he's in the HubSpot ecosphere and the Chief MarTech podcast, and that whole, they kind of coined that, and they create that big huge graph of all the companies, and it used to be 20 companies, now it's 20,000, and you can't even read your little logo in there. So.
Oh yeah, huge space, and so yeah, it feels to me like, of course, technology pushes forward. Everyone, it kind of has this effect of this is going to change the entire world, and then maybe it sort of drops back a little bit. There's some reality that sets in, right? Where do you see it going even beyond this? I mean, are you guys at the point of actually writing full stories or writing full content, just all the way through, or is it we're still in the phase of enhancing what a human can do?
We kind of do it all, I'd say, but the end result is that depending on who you are, what you're publishing, what you need to publish, certain solutions are going to be a fit. And I think that's really the big power of Market Muse. It can provide inspiration based on, I always like to say, the 3 ways you can be inspired is by yourself, what you've already done, where you might have had strengths and weaknesses and gaps and opportunities. You can be inspired by your aspirations. It's who you want to become. Or you can be inspired by others, typically in the form of competition. So Market Muse can take that triangle of things I might want to look at and put it all in one place for a content inventory or a content audit. That is where the real money's made. It's making good decisions about what to create. So that's a big area for us. Predictive analytics on what we should create, because I don't want you to create a content item that's beautiful and magical, and there's no chance for anyone to ever see it, right? And that's where a lot of people go wrong now. They're looking at they're trying to get to the finish line with content, but what they should have done is strategically built. And even for search engine optimization, if part of your site is terrible or off topic, it can actually impact the whole site. People are coming to that realization. Again, been singing it from the top of soapboxes for 15 years. But what we do is we can provide the inspiration of what to do and the why. Why should I do this? But then you say, okay, yeah, I want to do this. Well, now we can build you, with technology, we can build you an outline. We can build you questions you need to answer, topics you need to include, internal, external links. So we can get you to the brief, the content briefing, which I love briefs because they're a source of truth for writers. There's always an artifact to point to. I did what you asked me, or, oh yeah, this worked, whatever it is. And then we've been innovating in the field of natural language generation to take that brief and turn it into inspirational snippets and long form content so that the writer gets the outline and the data to support the decision to write this. But they also get competitive references, and they also can get how one mind and artificial intelligence would have maybe approached this, right? So what that I feel does is it gives them really very little chance of having writer's block. They may like a chunk of that and use it. They may like it, use it, and modify it. They may not like it at all, but it inspires them to think about how they would approach it. And what we've seen in practice is having that point of reference of an artificial intelligence generated draft makes a writer faster. Now, is there a flip side of that? Are there people that are going to just tweak that draft and publish it? Yes. It's not good, because once you publish it, you have the liability for it. So it's like publishing an outsourced writer's content without checking it. And that's bananas. Anyone that does that is off their rocker. It's happening right now. It's super scary, and it has the potential to be a huge business risk. So where I see this going, and what we take it down, we're trying to do it intelligently and editorially appropriate at each step while having the same impact that a great SEO might have.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a ton of sense. I mean, I can see people just being so busy and just being like, oh, I'm good enough, go ahead and publish. But you're right. I think there's a high standard that you should be looking to your work from an editorial quality standpoint. And if it's not really, yes, you can use the machines to generate. I love it where you guys are kind of doing maybe 80% of the work, I guess, getting you to a point where here's some things you want to discover and talk about, what your listeners or readers, I guess, would want you to cover. But you still got to fill it in with your mind. And so that's where I think sort of the human aspect still needs to come into this space. Yeah. Is that agreed?
I would love to figure out, and this is what I'm working on really is going from ideation. That editorial lens is the most powerful thing. You take it for granted if you're an expert on something. But, you were talking about beer before, right? If I read a paragraph that says that, all Mexican lagers are claras, my response is, no, they're not. That's crazy. That's not true at all. But the only way you'd know that is if you were an expert. So an AI generation might say that. The only way you'd know that that's not true is if you truly were an expert. That's the catch-22. Because let's say a generation of publishing from AI is generating not necessarily factually inaccurate components, but extremely subjective or biased data that doesn't have editorial oversight. There's an existential problem, and then there's a serious problem, and it's long-term impact. So not only is it ethically appropriate, but it also has the ability to negatively transform information retrieval. And it's a super threat to, a Microsoft or a Google or an Apple when they release their upcoming search engines. And those things aren't understood yet. There's no one looking down and saying, hey, wait a second, we've got to figure this out right now. I'm the guy who's trying to figure it out, but also turned it into a software product that still maintains editorial integrity. And that's real different than some of the other players in the generation space who are like, publish tons of content. Yeah, man, we're a robot. Cool. And what that's doing is it's just like crusting up the snake oil skins. I think it's making a mockery of the technology. It's taking away from the general spirit of what those technologies were built for. And I know this is a little bit sensational to say, it will all come crashing down. And I still want to be there when it does.
Yeah, it feels like, I think we maybe have all seen some of, basically, I would call it clickbait, right? So you're reading a story and then all of a sudden there's something there's an image and there's just like a tagline or something like that. And it's just a crazy thing, but they want you to click on it. And once you click into the story isn't actually really about that. There's maybe one sentence that maybe just sort of tries to get you. But again, I think you said sensationalize it or whatever. Yeah, that's really what they're trying to do is get people to click through. And it's frustrating.
So I'm going to be tweeting a thread today about what you just said. And that's completely amazing that you mentioned that. We call that, there's a subline of inbound marketing. This is completely unrelated to AI, by the way. There's a subline of inbound marketing called arbitrage and 2-hop arbitrage and 1-hop arbitrage. It's such a dark art. And what you described is typically a 1 or 2-hop arbitrage. And basically, you're inside somewhere, you are tempted to click on a thing that somebody got paid for that click. You land somewhere where the whole purpose of the article is for you to click on more ads and or create more page views. And you're on slide 20 and they still haven't told me how to lose weight. That's a dark art. And it is something that I'm very passionate. I'm one of the very passionate no's on that. So NO, but you'll find I'm a passionate no about a lot of things.
Sure.
I'm the internet sheriff, right?
Yeah, well, I'm glad somebody is because the internet's a wild and crazy place for sure. A lot of this stuff comes down to data, right? I'm assuming that's another thing that's changed from 2014 to now is there's just a lot more data out there. How are companies doing this? How are you guys doing this in some ways? Are you employing subject matter experts? Are you sort of scraping the web? Maybe all of the above? I don't even know. I just thought I'd, see if you could share some of that.
The first thing I'll say is one of the principles of our business was get data independent, right? We wanted to own everything. We wanted to build everything. We're not reliant on any one source. We try to build it all ourselves or have the capacity to with the right investment, with the right money. So if we have an infrastructure that's supported by a third party, we want to know that we could build it ourselves if we needed to. So all of our technology, we built it on our own. It's all on our own APIs. All our user interfaces are built on our own APIs so that it's very flexible. And that is kind of the thing. It's scraping. It sounds like such a terrible word, but being able to mine large data sets, large sets of language. We have a huge language database. We have a huge database of the web. We have basically large scale archives of the web. And then we continuously mine the web for information. And that's where it all comes from. So that's why we're able to maintain the largest keyword database in the world, which we do, and growing every day. Turn it into really fun workflows that are helpful for research, planning, writing, editing, publishing optimization. I've said that a few times. But anywhere you are in that workflow, we have a solution that will speed you up. And that's really why we do what we do.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I guess one part is getting the data. The other part, of course, is cleaning the data, classifying it, tagging it, all that stuff, right? So I think anybody could go out and continue to mine the internet like you're talking about, but having to figure out how you structure it properly is probably, one of your guys' secret sauces, I'm guessing.
Oh gosh, that's such a great sentence. You know who would really appreciate that you said that would be my CTO and my head of data science. It's one of the things that I get so pumped about is our data structures are beautiful. It sounds so nerdy to say that. So what I want to enable anyone to be a maker in our space, right? So we have a subsidiary of MarketMuse called GrepWords, GrepWords. We want to put out like a publicly accessible API of all the most common things that we do. And one of them is URL processing. And it's turning a page, which can be a Wild West experience, into something usable. And that's something that will be part of that. And, all the other ways, it's just, making it so that it's usable, but also like sometimes teams aren't as mature, right? Writing teams or search teams. And like, if you give them the whole world, they're like, all I wanted was, a slice of pizza, and you gave me a pizza restaurant. And, I get that. It still doesn't feel good if all you can do is, implement that slice of pizza, but giving someone the ability to choose the level of depth that's needed for them to at least get the ball running, and then they can progress into being more data driven. It's tough because you are enhancing editorial and content marketing and content strategy expertise, and you're enhancing expertise. But there's always a nice edge with artificial intelligence assistants. And to pair it back to grammar, there was a job of grammar checking and proofing. Proofing still has a place, but to be a proofer today, you got to be like a mega monolith superstar. And what I kind of equate what artificial intelligence impact on our industry is, all the really low quality crap is now like you can't get by writing garbage. We raised the bar on the minimum, the floor for content. We raised the bar for the floor of what it means to be a search engine optimization professional. You can be a writer and have no SEO experience. And you can use MarketMuse and you can write content as good as or better than an SEO expert without having to have learned everything. The bar has been raised and the gauntlet's been set. It's like, stop writing bad content. And if you do, you're not going to prosper. And that is just going to get more and more and more and more. And what you start seeing is people realizing that it's a harder game. Every day it's going to get harder. And that's the world.
Yeah, and that's why I think you're seeing companies like Grammarly really show up in so many places, because I started using it a couple of years ago, and I didn't realize how bad my grammar was. And just to have it sort of go through and be like, oh, click, 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 fix, fix, fix. You're right, sort of the lowest bar was spell checking. But a lot of other things I realize I'm really not that good at. And so now the expectation is going to be, I think everyone runs their stuff through Grammarly or whatever else, something. But at least, yeah, you're right. And, in some ways, it probably is a rising tide, lifts all boats type thing, right? So I think overall, this is a great place to help people communicate better. And whether it's a subject matter expert or you want to write better, you guys have now, I guess, probably focused into, writing specific to make, people be experts in certain areas. But across the board, it's just going to make us all become better humans and better communicators, I think.
That's the dream, right? I think, my mission and MarketMuse's elevator pitch is, set the standard for content quality, comprehensiveness, expertise. And what a beautiful ensemble it would be to have Grammarly give advice on expertise, right? It doesn't today. If anyone from Grammarly is listening to this, call me. I'll give you my cell phone. And Jeff@marketmuse.com. We have built prototypes. That's where, I love nothing more than being in Grammarly and approve. You're like, oh my God, this is great. You learn like your tendencies, my usage of the double dash, Oxford comma or no Oxford comma. You also like using MarketMuse. It makes me so happy to be watching a recording of a user doing a talk aloud or even just using. And I was writing an article about content marketing strategy and I forgot to talk about buyer personas and I forgot to talk about target markets. And like, I'm going to add a section. Oh man, that's like blood going into my body, like brand new blood going into the system. I love that. And I love I was talking to a publisher right before we started the recording, and I was like, let's look at this. Let's look at this scenario that you're in this topic. It was a security topic. And I'm like, your page is, a couple years out of date. It's not supported by other content in the buyer journey. You have early stage awareness content, but you need some middle of the funnel, more deep dive on other related security topics. And they're like, oh, wow. Yeah, this is like so actionable. So those types of things, that's what, gets me up in the morning, because let's say they write those 5 articles and all 5 of them are successful, right? Well, using subjective editorial, like brainstorming, their hit rate might have only been 1 out of 10. And bringing their hit rate up to 5 out of 10 is transformative. That's how we transform teams. It's not necessarily only because the articles they write are better. It's because their batting average went up 5x. Imagine if you were a baseball player and someone said you're batting 100 and someone's like, I can make you bat 500. Okay, why would you not do that? That's the thing that I'm trying to get across to everyone that spends money on writing. You're batting a very, very low percentage right now. You can't do it without AI. I tried. Trust me, I spent 15 years doing it manually. And I'm, getting to 30%. You're a deadly weapon. Getting to 50%, and you're a fast moving train, and get out of the way. And what I'll tell you is there's a few conglomerates who have recognized this, and they're just driving the train through markets. And while everybody's sitting there watching, and they're like, what are they doing? That's where we're going to see the ball going. It's towards conglomerates who get that AI is important.
Well, how does this, you mentioned about doing it manually for all these years. So how does this affect the future of work? It's one of the things I like to talk to people about, in this industry. I mean, there's some obvious things where obviously you don't need a bunch of people doing editorial stuff. But are there other areas, I think, like how do you see the writers that are coming up here? And I guess you've touched on this a little bit. They're all going to become better. But how is AI, and you could talk about writing, just even marketing in general, SEO, like how is this new technology going to affect the people that are the next generation, do you think?
The way I like to talk about it is jobs that contain manual tasks that shouldn't exist, I'd say. Those are the ones that go away. And you don't even realize that it goes away a lot of times. They just kind of disappear, or that task disappears. Using another area, which we don't produce products in, but is relevant, like paid ads, right? In 2014, bid management for paid ads was, manual or rule-based at best, if you had it semi-automated. Now, if you're not doing automated ad copy optimization or DCO with automated bid management using, full attribution data, you're dead. That's actually where the waste is in the market. It's people who think they can just do it without. But you don't realize that, the job of being an AdWords manager who manually adjusts bids doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist. So now who is impacted by my fields? It's the job of the person who manually cuts and pastes, does, medium to low quality keyword research, plops it in a spreadsheet, come out of their brain, they add some stuff or from their subjective expertise, and they, they package that up and say, hey, you do this, and then the writer looks at that and goes, look, I don't want to do that. Or they don't lift in, there's no attribution. Like those jobs, low quality SEO work, low quality writing, and monotonous editorial tasks. The feeling that you're hopeless goes away. That sounds weird, but you're hopeless and you're completely beholden on what Google does. I think that goes away. So the future of work for me is more empowered, more confident, inspiration to create, and inspiration to update, which isn't as sexy, but it's equally, if not more important, to keep your stuff up to date. My dream is that the future of work is empowered, confident creation and optimization.
I love that. That's great. Kind of takes a negative spin. A lot of people think, oh, look at all these jobs are going away. It takes a negative spin and actually elevates it to something that's a little bit more, inspirational and creative, which is what we all want to be. And I was thinking about, as you were talking about, automation, I was just thinking about, there's really, yes, there are people that are stockbrokers per se, but it's all algorithmically driven these days, right? All these buys and sells that are happening, things are happening because of an algorithm behind the scenes. No one's sitting out there buying these things and not, transferring money. It's just happening. I also heard, like, interestingly enough, like they were talking about automation on the radio this morning, and the jobs that are most set for automation is actually cashier. They said is like the number one job, right? And you just got to think about like who is inspired to basically be a cashier and sit there and run, cans over through the barcode scanner, right? Those people could be doing a lot more empowerment, confident, feeling more creative, doing a different type of job, I believe.
Customer success, right? Think about the best characteristics of a cashier, right? So you pair a monotonous task with the thing that actually supports the business. And that second level attribution. I love taking real world examples into AI. You could take computer vision and scan the amount of words interchanged by cashiers and the amount of the smile ratios, and use that to say, hey, you might be pressing buttons, but you pressing buttons on that machine is just our conduit to providing an amazing customer experience. I mean, that changes the discussion. So that maybe people are walking through a line and all their stuff is RFID tagged or in some way, it all checks out instantly, but they're having some sort of customer success or customer experience that supports and improves the brand so that someone doesn't feel like they're going to a robot factory to get their groceries. That's the future.
Exactly. I think we all need to feel like we're still talking to other humans. There's a complete human side to all of this that needs to be maintained. One of the things I do like to ask people is like, and I think you've touched around it for sure, but I mean, how do you define AI? If somebody says, you're working in the artificial intelligence or machine learning field, do you have a short synopsis that you typically say?
Yes. Predictive confidence. Confidence in predictions is the easiest way of describing it. But the way that manifests is, I think it's the transition from rules and rule-based thinking and decision-making to experiences that outclass what a human can do with rules. I saw a great maturity model for MarTech AI adoption, and it was going from manual to rules. So basically saying like doing everything by hand, doing things with if-then statements and collections of rules, and going to a scenario where the outputs and recommendations that are being supplied by artificial intelligence tell you something you couldn't have possibly known. And that first moment you get something that you couldn't have gotten to, or it amazes you. And that was right. That's AI for me. So I got a recommendation to make a decision that I couldn't have possibly gotten on my own. That's an exciting way to describe it, but it's confidence in prediction or predictive confidence. Those are my ways of getting people pumped about implementing AI internally.
Yeah, for sure. That makes total sense. And I'm a software engineer by trade. And so the majority of my career was putting in if-then statements, right, for all these types of things. And what you realize at some point is that breaks down, right? Because it's just, you can't cover all things. So really what machine learning does is sort of flip the model around, right? You throw all the data in and it comes up with all the algorithms and the if-then statements, whatever the heck it does inside of it through a neural net. And then it gives you data at the end and you're like, I didn't even realize there was a correlation to any of this. So yeah, you're right. Totally, like very, very, very practical solution is what you're talking about.
Yeah, one of my favorite AI companies is a company called MadKudu, MadKudu, and they do predictive lead scoring and behavioral modeling for intent to purchase. I think they're a unicorn that hasn't been found yet. So if anyone's so inclined, go talk to them. I love them. What they do is use machine learning to predictively qualify leads. All the arguments, this is our ICP. No, this is, they're a fit. No, they're not a fit. All that subjectivity and bad energy and the rules, if they are at a company that is, okay, well, let's test that assumption, right? And so I love the idea of like turning that into a composite score that everyone in the company can set their watch by. And that's predictive confidence. And that to me is a great example of MarTech use case where in my case, it's I'm going to write this article about how do you get bees out of your garage. I know I'm going to win an organic search if I write this. And that's, actually a real example, but that's the spirit of that predictive confidence across two different kind of spaces. So
interesting. Very cool. I will be having liner notes as a part of this podcast. So I'll definitely be sure to drop in links to all these companies and stuff that we talk about here. The other thing that I'd like to maybe ask is like, what's sort of a day in the life for a person in your role?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. Always changing, running a venture-backed startup. I'm a chief strategy officer, but I'm also see a need, fill a need. My old soccer coach used to say. I'm typically often in that role as well. So it could be anything from being involved in a sales or partnership discussion, talking about, an account management or customer success thing. I used to lead the product, data science, and engineering teams in addition to the marketing teams here. So it may be, taking part in a marketing campaign or that, consulting with our CTO now and head of data science who are better than me at those things, which is the true measure of a good co-founder is if everyone in your company is better than you at their jobs. So it's really, I get into a lot of the details. I'm also still heavily responsible for, driving interest in our offering. I also have two little boys, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, who I try my best to spend as much time as I possibly can, whether it's watching, Mini Force on Netflix or playing with Beyblades. That's it. Those are typical things I might be doing. Also, being part of building another business from scratch after having had the experience with Muse and being really excited about the fact that we've built that one so that it can be very autonomous and I don't have to spend that much time on it already. And that's kind of a cool part of my life as well. I don't get to do too much of my out of work passions at this point in my life, but one day we'll get back on the golf course.
I like to tell people, you're typically going through a season, and there's if you might be like a farmer and the season is the planting season. So you got to go heads down and you just got to get it done for a period of time.
I think that there's the content intelligence market, our market. We created this market basically. And when people realize that making great decisions as content marketers, as content strategists, and as editorial leads is the most important thing. Everything else is details. When they realize that that's the key, this market's going to pop. And it's just, we're right on that tipping point for that being the case. Like, it's not about robots writing pages. It's about making the right decisions about what to write. That's where the money's at. In a dream world, that's my day in the life. It's advocating for content intelligence as a practice.
Which you have a strong passion and personal,
personal pain.
Goal, personal pain, personal pain, but also personal goal to try and fix for sure. For anyone entering the field, do you have any advice? You've been doing this for many years, and what I like to ask a lot of people that have been on the show is, if I was just getting into this area, I'm either maybe tech or non-tech, right? Maybe I just graduated from school with a communications degree, or marketing. What are some sort of advice or anything else that you might give to people?
It's a great time to be coming from a liberal arts or comms or PR and want to get into content marketing and want to get into data science and AI. It's becoming, the entry points the barriers to entry are slowly going away. I think the example of that is the technical SEO field. I feel like I was an early player in that movement, but there's also quite a few just trailblazers in that field who have said, we know nothing about AI. We know nothing about data science. They didn't come from a computer science background like I did, but they knew learning about that. And there was very low to low accessibility to learn about that as a practitioner, say 5 or 6 years ago. But now it's a little bit easier to get there. And I really, really want people to be able to make things and to hack things together so that they can learn from that. And I really recommend that. So I would recommend, if you're in the comms and you want to get into this space, look at accessible data science implementations, look at the technical SEO space, look at the content intelligence market and what's being done in those spaces. But also, learn how to tell a story, learn how editorial works. Those are things that most SEOs don't know. They don't kind of care. They haven't really gotten into that empathetic mode. It's just pushing your nose up to an inefficient system won't get you there for your career. Looking at an inefficient system and saying, okay, at least I understand it. I know at least where the gaps are. Can make you a change agent. And my recommendation for younger folks getting into the space are, in your early part of your career, be willing to be a change agent. Because even if you get, burned and thrown out of place, you did it for a good reason.
For sure. Well, that's great. We're going to start to kind of like wind down the conversation here, but this has been really, really fascinating. I do have just kind of two last questions. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter and Jeff@marketmuse.com. Go check out the Market Muse site. Our blog is just a treasure trove. I do podcasts and webinars. We have a content strategy webinar series and archive that's, more probably like 100 recordings. So anything you're interested in, you could probably find a recording there. So go check out, or go to Google and type in content strategy webinars. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Please do. I love any questions, answer everything myself, even if it's 2 a.m. As you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Well, I guess my last question is, are there any topics or anything in particular that maybe we didn't cover that you wanted to?
No, Market Muse, MarketMuse is our main function. We have a beautiful keyword research solution, topic analysis solution coming out in the spring. If that's intriguing, I also have a data solutions. We're a data solutions provider, GrepWords, which if you're looking to get keyword intelligence, search engine data intelligence, and looking to do it at scale, it's an easy implementation. You can get your application implementation solution down, and also super reliable.
Sounds great. Are you guys hiring?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And technology, data science, engineering, back end, front end, sales, account management. Gosh, you can't find amazing people. So if you're an amazing person, or at least think you are, feel free to shoot me a note as well, or go check out we have it on a Greenhouse. So you type Market Muse Greenhouse, a list of open recs.
For sure. Well, yeah, like I say, I'll be sure to put links and all that stuff here in the liner notes for it. So, well, Jeff, thank you so much for the time. I think it's been an awesome conversation. Just been a fascinating discussion about an area that honestly I didn't know a whole lot about myself. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a couple different organizations. We're always looking to sort of generate new content, and it's been a very manual process for me to have to write blog postings. I have a weekly newsletter that's curated around the artificial intelligence of things, and so. Boy, I'm going to check out your product for sure, because I think there's a lot of interesting areas.
Yeah, the Trojan horse of you becoming a customer is obviously always the thought. But there's also some other solutions for other types of content, like for newsletter curation and things like that, using artificial intelligence that I think are super intriguing too. So yeah,
maybe a follow-up podcast, man. Have you back?
I would love to. All right, I'll talk to you then.
You've listened to another episode of the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. We hope you are eager to learn more about applying artificial intelligence and deep learning within your organization. You can visit us at AppliedAI.mn to keep up to date on our events and connect with our amazing community. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Justin at AppliedAI.mn if you are interested in participating in a future episode. Thank you for listening.